This is Podco Media Networks.
It's the Innovation Podcast with Mark Reed Edwards and Garnet Harriman. Let's start the show.
Garnet, good afternoon.
Hey, how are you?
I'm all right. One thing we talk a lot about audio lately because we're launching Podco Media Networks, but video is huge as well. And I've been doing video for a few decades, but still using it in marketing and digital isn't exactly well figured out. You go and you shoot it and you don't really know what to do with it. But our guest, Michael Hoffman, says his firm is revolutionizing video with video relationship management. Garnet, you want to intro him?
Sure. Michael is I would say, serial entrepreneur. Maybe Michael will expand on that. He's had multiple entrepreneurial experiences, some at startups, some at larger companies where they were doing entrepreneurial things. His experience cuts across marketing and media, video, documentary filmmaking, university level education, and all of that rich tapestry of life experience wound him up as the CEO of a killer cutting edge startup, soon to make some very, very big announcements about their funding and stuff like this, called Gather Voices out of Chicago. Hi, Michael.
Hello, Garnet.
Great to hear your voice and briefly see you earlier when we had the video link working.
Thank you. Well, great to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, we've wanted to have you on for some time, actually, and you've been super busy, and we've been busy with related Podco things that we're doing. Podco is the holding company that owns this podcast and a dozen other podcasts in our network. Thank goodness we found the time before everyone got sucked up into the holidays and other things. So without further ado, maybe we can get started on some basic stuff, actually, and then we'll get deeper into your subject matter as we go through.
Sure.
I would love to get a little background. Let's give our audience some background on you. I know I didn't do it justice by ticking off that laundry list of your rich portfolio of experiences, but maybe you want to speak to your background and then maybe speak a little bit to the origin story of Gather Voices, the eureka or aha moment that made you want to hitch your wagon to the Gather Voices star.
Sure. I've had an interesting trajectory starting out of college in politics, actually. And I think of it as my first marketing job because that's what I was doing. I was working for a political consulting firm, helping market candidates across the country. And that was my first foray into marketing. Learned a lot about messaging, targeting, all kinds of things there. And then started law school a couple of years later and then realized that I didn't really want to be a lawyer. Wait a
minute. Are you getting this theme, Mark Reed Edwards? This is the second recording session in 48 hours that we've had where our illustrious, successful guest is talking about going to law school and not practicing law.
Yeah, it seems like a career path that we should all explore.
Maybe we should all go to law school and not be lawyers. We'll be better off.
I almost went to law school, but I didn't. And then I had a career that didn't involve being a lawyer, so I kind of took a shortcut on that.
Yeah, that's true. I'd say it's remarkable how many people that went to law school with me who started practicing, but then ended up doing something else, some kind of business thing or real estate or some other thing.
I think that's a credit to the law degree versus crappy degrees like the MBA. The law curriculum, I think it's actually, more of an intellectual, more of a learning experience, in my opinion, than the MBA. And I'm allowed to say that.
That's interesting because I do think it accentuates communication and being able to distill arguments. And that's super valuable in any technology, in any world.
On writing.
Yeah, exactly. Writing, which seems to be a lost art, but is absolutely critical.
Well, and everybody knows the law is all based on fiction anyway. So the whole notion of storytelling is embedded in the foundation of the legal curriculum.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what you get. You go to law school and all the cases are just these stories that you start to get to know, I had an opportunity, a friend who was working in startups and saying, hey, this internet thing is something else and you should be doing this with me and not hanging out in law school. And I had a feeling that he was right. And he was actually working out of Israel at the time. And for those who don't know, lots of the technologies that we take for granted in the early and mid and today in the internet age come out of Israel. And so I picked up and moved to Israel, but spent 6 years starting companies, working in venture capital, all kinds of experiences there, all kinds of different technologies. It was really an incredible education. And when I moved to Chicago after that, trying to figure out what am I going to do now, I really wanted to build something from scratch. I really wanted to get out of the venture game, get out of the kind of growth at all costs kind of thing. And I ended up getting calls from people saying, hey, we know you know this internet stuff and we know you know this marketing stuff. Can you help us with our website? Can you help us with our digital strategy? And that morphed into digital marketing agency that's still around in Chicago called C3 Communications. And that's spelled SEE number 3 Communications. And building that agency really made me take all the marketing knowledge that I had, but really create some discipline around it and understand, how can we help clients? How can we efficiently help clients? And we really ended up doing 3 core buckets of work. One was web, anything on the internet, building websites, applications, that kind of stuff. The other was strategy. And the third thing was video. And so from the very beginning, we believed in video. My co-founder at C3, Danny Alpert, is a well-known documentary film producer who tells really powerful stories. And we realized that in the age of broadband internet, you now had, for the first time ever, a video distribution platform that wasn't owned by some big network or some place where there was a gatekeeper. And so that meant that for the first time, any business, any creator had an outlet for their media. And so all of a sudden, businesses which never thought about video before, because video essentially meant television before that, and only a very small group of companies could ever afford that, all of a sudden, video was now in the toolkit of every company in some way or another. And we wanted to be at C3, at the agency, we wanted to be the leaders in that, really helping educate organizations about how video could be powerful for them, how they could do it effectively. And so, that was one of the things we built the agency around. Our clients at the agency, we began to focus on the world of charities and nonprofits, and we work for many of the large and work for the agency works for many of the large charities like the Alzheimer's Association or Make-A-Wish Foundation, those kind of groups. And I realized back in the mid 2000s that these groups just didn't understand video. And I wanted to figure out, well, how do I get them to understand that video is really powerful and important? And I ended up creating something called the Do-Gooder Video Awards. And for some years, we partnered with YouTube and honored the best social cause video on YouTube. And by doing that, we were really creating a way to just have many of these groups see what everybody else was doing, get inspired by it, and want to do more. And so I had a selfish reason for creating it, which was I didn't want to have to keep explaining to these organizations why video was important. I wanted them to see it and so that they would want it and need it. And it became a really fun and interesting institution in that world.
Quick side story for you about what you just said, with regard to educating nonprofits in particular about video and the power of it and rewarding it with your award. I'm a board member at a pretty interesting company called GiveQuick, and they were trying to create tools for a new generation of philanthropy, and still are, and they're transitioning to other things now. When I first met them some years ago, 5 years ago, something like this, I didn't like any of their strategy. What I really loved was this thing that they had built to create a content community, a video content community on their site where nonprofits could tell their story. And it was a video storytelling tool. Not nearly as sophisticated as anything Gather Voices is doing, but it was just something that would automate the storytelling process by saying, hey, give me a purpose shot, give me an action shot, give me an outcome shot, that kind of thing. And they would stitch it together in almost like a Vine-like video. I immediately understood how powerful that tool was. And that tool ended up being like one of the most compelling things about the entire business model. So to your point about what you were learning even back then and are furthering with Gather Voices.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because when we started the Do-Gooder Awards, we really had to convince people that, video was important. Well, the world has caught up to that, right? And that we don't really have to convince people anymore. And we have a different issue, which is their ability to do it. So I think anyone who goes online today sees that, I like to say, video is eating the internet. I mean, it's just where it wasn't, it is. So, there wasn't really video on Facebook, and then Facebook kind of turns on video. And now there's video is the only thing getting really any organic reach on Facebook. LinkedIn turned on video in the last months, and it's, becoming dominant on that platform. So we're really seeing video everywhere. And so it's easy to convince people that they need it. The harder part is, how do you get it? And this is really the transition to Gather Voices, because as people realized that video is really important, they would call me at the agency and say, Michael, we love that one video you do for us a year that costs $30,000 or $50,000 or $75,000 or whatever it is. But hey, we need a lot more video. We need video all the time. We need video every day. We need video for our website, for social media, for our other kinds of communication. So can you help us? And for several years, we really tried to figure out, well, how do we do that? And we kind of worked around the edges of that. What we would do is, if you paid for a 3 or 4 or 5 minute video to play at a gala event or some other thing, we would create a 30-second cut or a 15-second cut or a 90-second cut, so you'd have multiple options to use. But all of that was kind of playing around the edges. I don't know, Garnet, do you remember the flip video camera?
I totally do.
Cisco killed it.
Yeah, exactly. Cisco bought it, and when they thought they were getting into consumer products, and then they realized they could foresee the iPhone future and realized that even though it was still selling quite a lot when they killed it, I think.
I remember.
But for them, it was nothing. But the flip video camera, for those listening who don't remember what it was basically like a little square, a little bit bigger than one of the big size cell phones today. And it was a video camera, that digital video camera. And it was called the Flip because it had a little USB thing that flipped out of the side. You could plug it right in your computer and download all the media off it. And it was super popular for a while. So as we were starting to get early questions about, how to help us, we did a deal with Cisco where they would actually send us some boxes of those cameras, and we would give them out to some of these clients of ours and say, okay, you get people in the field to shoot some video and then send it back to us and we'll do editing. And that really didn't work at all. And it didn't work at all because those cameras held an hour's worth of HD video, right? So imagine getting 20 of those cameras back. Well, that doesn't save you anything. Now you have 20 hours of video that you actually have to go through and figure out if there's anything useful there. And much of the time there wasn't. So it was an idea. It was the beginning of an idea of saying, hey, can people do some things themselves or not? And then really the aha moment for me, what led to Gather Voices, was that 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, there was a film that came out. It was at Sundance called Tangerine. And it was the first movie in movie theaters that was shot on an iPhone. And at the same time, I'm reading about this film shot on an iPhone, which I thought was absolutely unbelievable. What an incredible thing. And at the same time, I'm reading about that. I have a client that said, hey, we have customers in 5 states that we want on video. Can you help us? And I'm giving them at the agency, the agency is giving them some quote of sending a producer around to 5 states, and it's some crazy price tag that they couldn't afford. And I'm thinking, if the iPhone is a professional video camera, which it clearly is, and everyone that we want on video has one in their pocket, how come we can't get the video that we need? And we realized that if you just ask people to make a video for you, everything that could go wrong does go wrong. They say the wrong things and they talk too long and their lighting's bad and their sound's bad and they hold their phone the wrong way, all of those things. And then you need a release signed, right? You need the rights so that you can actually own the content. And then how do you get that big video file off their phone? You don't want it to be overly compressed. And so if you've ever tried to teach somebody how to do Dropbox on their phone, imagine trying to do that for 100 people. It's impossible. So we thought, okay, there's potential here, but we need to create some kind of technology, some kind of middleware between the organization that wants the video and the user who can make a video with their phone, where the organization can set up a request for video, create talking points and a time limit, give instructions. And then by just clicking on a link or landing on a web page, that person who's going to make the video sees it, and the software would walk them through making the video that the organization would want. So on their own device, we would check their lighting and their sound. We'd give them talking points and a time limit. We'd have them sign a release and have that video automatically sent back to the organization that sponsored it. And that's where we started. And then we also realized that the person who's getting that video back doesn't know anything about editing. And they want to put that video on Facebook, or they want to put it on their website, but they want their logo in it, or they want to trim it, or they want a call to action on the end of it. So we realized we needed tools on the back end as well. And so that's what Gather Voices is. It's software that makes it easy for organizations to collect, manage, and share video by allowing anyone, whether inside the organization or outside, to record, to send, and then for those people who manage that content to be able to manage video like they manage everything else easily with a few clicks.
That's a really interesting story, I got to say. From politics to agency world to, the history of like not corporate, but consumer gadgets in this country to where you are now. Let's see. I guess the part of that really stands out for me is the iPhone moment, or the tangerine moment, sort of, right? Because that was a clear turning point in terms of the decentralization of video collection in a way that was not only easy to collect, but also easy to disseminate, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That was a problem with the flip phone. That is the dissemination part, the sharing, the collaboration part.
The iPhone really has changed a lot, right? And it's hard to believe that it's only 12 years old, I think.
And the initial iPhone didn't record video. It was a few generations in, as I recall.
Yeah, it was all about pictures in the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, the one that Tangerine was shot on was a 5S, just to give you a sense.
Wow.
Yeah.
And think about where the cameras have gone since then, right? The difference between iPhone 5 and today. And so if you could shoot a movie on a 5S, I mean, think about this new iPhone, and what it can do. It's absolutely phenomenal what they've been able to do with software.
I'm holding an iPhone 11 Pro in my hand, actually.
Well, aren't you fancy?
I just switched over. So ask me what my previous phone was. I think it was not much older than that.
The StarTAC?
The StarTAC. Yeah, I have one of those.
Not much younger than the iPhone 5S. I think I had a 7 before this or something. Maybe an 8. I don't know.
I've got an 8 Plus, and I love it.
Yeah, I mean, those are good. Really, really incredible what they've done with that. And I think there's a bigger thing going on, which is that because it's been so easy, not only to make content, but to watch content, right? When the iPhone first came out, there was debates about, would anybody really watch a movie on a phone? Or would anybody really watch a football game on a phone? Well, yeah, the answer is absolutely they will. And so what we're seeing is this incredible revolution on the consumer side, where everyone who is a content consumer, and it used to be people, that's all people were, right? Content creators were the professionals, the networks, the agencies, and consumers just consumed content. Today, everyone is a content creator and a content consumer. And on the consumer side, sites like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, now TikTok are training generations of people to be creators and to create content.
We're going to come back to that TikTok thing, by the way. So
sure.
I'm fascinated by them.
So I look at that, and if you imagine sort of two sides of the world, the consumer side and the business side, and you have this giant bubble of energy and activity of people making videos on the consumer side. And I say to myself, well, that has to bleed into the business world, right? It's got to change how people work, how people think about brands, how people interact with brands, how people interact with their own employers, how they bring their knowledge together, all of those things. And we're just at the very beginning of that. We really are at the very beginning of that. It hasn't translated yet. And that's because mostly the paradigm of video in the enterprise and business is the old paradigm. It's this big project. Every video is a big project that you have to hire professionals for, that you have a different timeline for, that is super brand polished. And that's been the way business works with video. And it's going to take a little bit of time and a little bit of push for that to change.
This subject, I mean, guys like us who have lived a little while and seen things and done things for a couple of decades, almost 3 decades. I can't speak for you guys, but for me, I'm about 3 years shy of being in my 3rd decade of being in the business world. We could go on and on about this because, this is so seminal. But I want to take a step back and make sure that the audience really, really wraps their mind around what it is that Gather Voices is offering in a modular way, just as simply as possible, that is so effective and so business changing. I'm going to repeat your mantra, and then you tell me how the modules or the offerings sort of separate out. Manage, create, publish video quickly and at scale.
Yeah.
That's the mantra, right?
That's right.
All right. So how does that break down in terms of like pieces of the overall platform or modules in the overall offering?
Sure. Well, it starts with video creation or collection. So how do you make it easy for someone to use these powerful cameras on devices and even the cameras on our laptops to create content and content that's useful for business? And so the creation and collection side allows the person who wants video, and that could be a marketer. It could be somebody who manages a conference. It could be somebody who does knowledge management internally or internal communications. And they want some video content from somebody internal or external. They want a customer or a member to make a video. And so the collection side lets them create a request, which again is setting a time limit and talking points, branding it, and then sharing it. And they can share it with a link. A link can be texted, it can be emailed, it can be put in social media. But also, a lot of our clients are doing is they're integrating the video capture side into existing workflows. So for example, we have many clients that run conferences and events, and a conference would have a call for speakers. So you have to fill out the form if you want to run a workshop or speak at this conference. And so our clients are integrating video into that form, saying, okay, what kind of workshop do you want to do? Now you have to make a 1-minute video telling us about that workshop. And that button to launch our software is right within that. It's embedded right into that form so that anyone, anywhere on any device can, right in that workflow, capture video. So that's the capture side. So that can be done, again, internal to an organization or external, on their phones, on their laptops, wherever. And then the managed side is, well, all that video has to come back somewhere. And so it comes back to a private, centrally managed platform for each of our customers. So if you're the business that requested that video, you get a ping that there's a new video comes in, and you log into your management platform and you see all the video content that's being created and collected. You can sort that content by the different requests that you've put out.
This management platform looks like a dashboard, right? That would be the way that I experience it if I was.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, a dashboard. And you can share that video with some other internal stakeholders. And then you can edit that video right from the dashboard.
That's cool.
We don't replace those professional editors, right? Most of our clients, they need some basic things. They need to be able to trim a video. They are going to take 3 videos they got and stick them together as a compilation. They need to put some branding. They want a watermark or a logo in that video. Most of the time, they also want some kind of call to action. So at the end of the video, they want to say, go to this website or learn more about this over here or whatever it is. And so we wanted to give our clients the ability to do that without having to call the experts, because as soon as you call the experts, it's slow.
And expensive.
And expensive, yeah. But what we've noticed is, I think, just in the bigger picture, that the people who are collecting this video also manage other kinds of content. They manage social media posts, or they manage internal network stuff, or whatever it is. And they feel competent on all of those other kinds of media. They can write things, they can post things, they can, do all of that. But as soon as you say video, it's a whole different thing. It's a project with a different timeline, a different set of resources, different budget, different people, all of that. And so really our vision is, well, how do we let those people manage this video content like they do everything else in a nimble way with tools that are out of the box, like everything else that they do. And so that's what we're enabling them with Gather Voices.
That's pretty revolutionary. The entire package and the perspective is pretty revolutionary. I think you can talk more about the traction that you're getting later, but I think the traction is definitely testament to that. When you and I first met some months ago, it must have been almost 6 months ago now, and you told me about the content creation module flavor of embedding in a workflow of like a company or an enterprise workflow. And you mentioned that in the context of events. My immediate reaction was, do you remember what my reaction was about that? It sounded like you basically were giving them the tools to create an on-demand in-house speakers bureau.
Yeah, that's right.
It really functions like that.
And if you've been to a conference lately, when you go to the conference website and you click on the speakers or the sessions that you could go to, 99% of the time, it's just a bunch of text, right? It's just like big blocks of text.
Yeah, dry.
Maybe there's a picture of the person who's going to be the speaker, but oftentimes not even that. And so that's where we see there's just so much room to add so much more video. Because if I go to that and I see this person in a fairly casual setting saying, I'm really excited to be at this conference. Here's what we're going to talk about. This is a really important topic. And you go, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to go to that. And to be more engaging. And there's just so much more room for that out there. In terms of the workflow, though, I'll say something about that, which is interesting. We find that when people see our tools, they get very excited. And they often just come up with like a million ideas. Like, oh, now that we can get video from anyone, we should do this and we should do this and we should do this. And often those are really good ideas. But when you start to then try to implement those ideas, these organizations often say, well, who's going to do that, right? Like it's a whole nother set of work. It's a whole new thing to do. It's a whole nother set of work. And that becomes challenging. And what we've learned is, when we first started selling, we got excited with them. We would say, oh, that's great. Let's do that. And then we realized that people don't have unlimited amounts of bandwidth as organizations, and that the real opportunities, the easy opportunities, kind of the low-hanging fruit, is the things they do already. They're already asking people to fill out a form. They're already asking people to give feedback or fill out a survey or put their name on a website, or there already were these workflows where now video can live and video capture can live. That's the real opportunity quickly to be able to just dramatically add to the amount of video content you have.
Sure. All that makes sense. The last thing you want to do when you're growing a business and, looking for early revenue traction, the last thing you want to do is systematically create like disappointing customer experiences, right? Even if you're a positive part of that, if you fall down a rabbit hole and they end up disappointing themselves, that's not a good thing. So that's a good sales insight. It's also a nice way of saying you don't really like my idea, but whatever.
I think it's just a matter of time that organizations are able to do more, right? But it's a question of where do you start? And I think you start by making the things that you do already better.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, trust is a big issue today. How do you see the organizations that are successfully using Gather Voices dealing with these issues? And then we can maybe circle back to some thoughts on politics, because I know that you had mentioned politics earlier, and you and I have brainstormed offline a couple of times about kind of the potential killer application being in, say, presidential elections and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you mentioned that, because the moment that we're in that makes Gather Voices such a right now thing, we talked about these powerful cameras and devices. Well, that's just one part of it. The other part is about this trust issue, because when I was starting the agency years ago, highly polished, highly branded content was exactly what everybody wanted, and it was effective. Well, today, when consumers see highly polished and highly branded content, they dismiss it as something that is trying to manipulate them, right? They don't trust.
It's not authentic.
Exactly.
I remember in the 1990s trying to convince a VP at the company I was working at that we should go out and shoot high 8 video to interview customers. And that was poo-pooed because it was not
too grainy.
Yeah, it just wasn't high end enough.
Right. No, that's right. And that's where I say most companies, they're still in that paradigm, but the world has changed dramatically, which is that what people trust are people that are like them, are people that share their values or interests, are people that are in their networks. And they don't trust media. They don't trust brands. They don't trust government. And there's a lot of data around that. I think one of the best is Edelman, the big PR firm. Richard Edelman does this thing called a trust barometer, and he's been doing it for like 20 years. And, starting in 2016, surprise, surprise, trust has kind of fallen off a cliff in the US.
What happened then? I'm not sure.
And there's, we're in a supremely low trust environment. And so authenticity is key. And so that's the trade-off, is that when something is too polished, you start to question its authenticity. And so having a real person saying something that is real is very powerful. And I've been telling this, I do a lot of speaking and teaching, and I've been saying for a while now that I think the primary role of marketers today is not to be clever, but really is to find the compelling stories from real people and amplify them. Because the real people who experience your product or your organization or your membership or your event or whatever it is, the way they'll describe their experience is nothing you could make up, right? It's some intersection between their own worldview and lived experience and whatever they did with you. They're going to describe that in a way that just is something you couldn't write. And so your job is to figure out, as a marketer, I think, is to figure out, how do I find those stories? How do I get them and capture them? And then how do I take the good ones and how do I put some muscle behind that and share it and push it out, into the world?
All right, we'll continue our chat with Michael Hoffman next time as we discuss trust networks, politics, and gather voices, and how candidates might use the platform, plus a lot more.
Thanks for joining Garnet and Mark on the Innovation Podcast. Visit theinnovationpodcast.co to subscribe and listen to other episodes.